seeds as appropriate technology. And we had 2 long, thin rows at U of A Campbell Avenue Farm, and they watered it twice a week, whether we wanted them to or not, which was not so good for the tepparies who just put on leaves instead of beans. But we finally managed to get them to quit watering. From there we went, we were at the Cup, I guess, at that point maybe?
Your offices?
Yeah, down at the Campus Christian Center, and then we,
St. Andrews in Armory Park. Remember when we were in the
oh, then we moved to St. Andrews,
rectory,
which was their old rectory, and we were there, and the seed bank was up in the attic. The seed bank had been in a refrigerator before that. It was at Gary's house, and then it was in tubs at my house, and then finally the refrigerator at the Cup, it had a big chain on it. Everybody's probably heard about the chain to keep nosy people out. And then we went to St. Andrews, and then Cynthia left, and I took over the meals for I don't know, it was directly from you or somebody else in between, I can't remember. And then we went out on our own because we were getting so much attention from the press and other people interested in these seeds and what we were doing, and the organization was interested in nutrition, and although it fit in, it was a little bit of a stretch. And they gave us the seed collection, and so Barney and I, who were new together, and Gary and Karen, who were then married, each put in $100. I think Barney was a little short.
I was short, I had
to pay for corporation papers and all that kind of stuff that we had to do. The attorney donated his time, I believe. And we took off from there, and our first gardens were at Tucson Botanical Garden, or after the U of A Campbell, but we had real gardens there. And we hired our first employee, and I can't think of her name.
Esther Moore.
Esther Moore, thank you. And she was our gardener. She was part-time. And eventually...
There's that wonderful ramada there that was built.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we built a ramada.
And
there's
demonstration
Had
garden.
to rebuild it.
Yeah, I imagine they did. And we actually had it built by Autumn from the
it's a
reservation.
beautiful ramada.
And there's still, the gardens are still there, right? There's some runoff and some, what do you call them?
Basins
Layered
and-
gardens. Yeah. What have I
In
left out?
1983, we found a native seed search. That was when we collected the $80 from me and the 100 from everybody else. And our original intents were varied, but we defined our area of interest as Durango to Durango, Las Vegas to Las Vegas, Durango, Colorado to Durango, Mexico, Las Vegas, Nevada to Las Vegas, New Mexico. We were interested in adapted field and garden seeds, crops, heirlooms, and wild relatives. And from the very beginning, we were very interested in ex situ conservation, that is a seed bank, as well as in situ conservation. That's where the seeds came from. So we had 2 prongs. We weren't very successful initially on the in situ.
Well, that's because it's expensive.
And it means you've got to go a long distance. We were, from the very beginning, interested in helping farmers stay on their land. And that was through a variety of techniques. In northern Mexico, that was through the purchase of crafts and selling the crafts at Native Seed Search, as well as other places. Many of the craft makers are farmers, not only with the Tarahumara, but the Yaqui and Mayo as well. And so we wanted to keep them, help them stay on the land. Our first non-Meals for a Million seed bank was at Gary and Karen's cottage. And we had a series of incidents there. Gary and Karen's kids got into the seed bank and ate them all up.
It was just some chili seeds. It wasn't the whole thing.
And then Amadeo was storing some dead birds in the freezer.
Vultures.
And the electricity went out. And so for a long time, the seed bank smelled culture.
Had an aroma. I don't think
Wow.
there's anything left now, but some of the packaging got the stuff.
Amadeo's an ethnobiologist who wrote the beautiful book, At the
Oh.
Desert's Green Edge.
Oh, yeah. The Tona Odo book? Is it the...
Pima.
Gila.
Gila,
River
yes,
Pima.
Gila book,
And
yes.
he will be honored this spring here in Tucson with a
Yes.
meeting and a festschrift. And
Wow.
so that's who
Beautiful.
Amadeo is.
Amadeo's
Of
an
the
old
dead
friend
birds.
of Gary and Mahina's. We moved from the cottage to Esperero Canyon, where Mahina rented for many, many years on a month-to-month basis with no lock on the back door.
The little stone house.
Yeah.
And we had the seed bank in the basement. I built shelves, and I got buckets, pickle buckets, from hamburger joints here in town, and cleaned out the grease. They were using them for storing grease, and we cleaned those out, and we still have a lot of those green buckets. Mahina's house became headquarters for Native Seed Search. We had the basement occupied. We had the extra bedroom filled with seed packets. The study was a shipping room, and the living room was used on occasion. So the back room where the freezer was also Native Seed Search. So
Only the
basically,
bedroom, I think.
I was gonna say, where did you live?
Yeah, only the bedroom didn't have any seeds or catalogs or anything.
As I recall, Mahina had this greenhouse outside.
a cage.
I had a caged garden for a while.
She was a fold out in one of the gardening magazines.
Oh.
The lady that gardens in a cage.
Did you guys photo document these various...
Oh, no.
No?
There weren't
There's
cell
a few,
phones
there's a
then.
few.
Right. I
photos.
mean,
There's a few probably.
can see them in the
Fabulous
Seed Head News.
I found one of the corn mother.
Yeah.
They called her. She was laying on the floor.
We got a grant from Tides Foundation
Whoa.
early on, and using that
Gary.
money,
Gary was the one who was good
we
at that.
bought lists of people. And so we did a mailing using Mahina's living room as a mailing.
And every other room.
We sent out 50,000 catalogs
Wow.
By hand.
by hand.
By hand.
I got it.
A few people helped. Gary and Karen took about 5,000 of them, and I had friends who came and helped. And we had, in different rooms were
That's
different
huge.
states.
That's huge.
And some of the
We had
lists
to
we
merge
got,
the lists.
some of the lists we got were hippie lists
They were
with really interesting names like
catalog.
Ponderosa pine.
Ponderosa pine,
Yeah.
juniper berry, and so some of those.
Whole Earth catalog list was one of them.
Oh, gosh.
And they had some funny names on it.
And about this time, we began serious seed collecting. In '86, we moved to the Tucson Botanical Garden in a friend's house, where we had an office and seed bank and a distribution and a demonstration garden. And eventually we had a museum that Kevin dealt with and a shop. So we were selling crafts from the botanical
And
garden.
seeds.
In the late 1980s, we were given the Homer Owens collection. Homer Owens had grown seeds out for many years, and his son Wolf didn't want to continue the tradition. He had gotten a collection of seeds from a man who was a trapper, hunter, farmer, and he taught Homer how to look for gold and how to trap. And he said when he was old, I've got a seed collection that I was given by a man that collected the seeds in the 1860s originally. Most of them were from the Colorado River.
Or Bill Williams River was another big
He
one.
collected on the Bill Williams. Interestingly, the Homer Owens collection had many sweet corns that are now disappeared in the Colorado River. And so he gave it to us, and that really boosted interest in the staff and the board. About 1990 to 92, we had a diabetes project. relationship between foods and diabetes. And Gary got the money, and we had seminars and various projects. And we published literature on seeds and diabetes. In 1991, Native Seed Search helped sponsor a World Bank meeting here at the U of A. It was a forestry improvement development project in Durango and Chihuahua. And the World Bank, when they started the project, it was a $70, $80 million project. The World Bank didn't realize that there were Indians in the area, and they didn't realize that there were ejidos, community institutions, and so they were really naive, and they did not know that Chihuahua and Durango had the most biological diversity of any area in Mexico, and they had the most agricultural diversity. So Native Seed Search got involved, and I was going through customs once a week or more, and I had to spend hours in the customs office, the broker's office. And so while I was waiting there, I drafted 275 questions for the World Bank, because when the project, when the conference was ended, the World Bank thought they had convinced everybody this was a wonderful project, and of course they hadn't. So I drafted all these questions. Mahina helped immensely, and we sent them to the World Bank with Gary's signature at the bottom. And the project director at the World Bank called me up immediately getting it. He said, "I know who did this, it wasn't Gary." Anyway, we bought the World Bank project, and we stopped the project cold.
There were a few other groups involved in this too, it wasn't all us.
What really helped us out, one of our members in Mexico was a friend of the royal family in England. And Prince Charles was coming to Mexico. And so she sent Prince Charles's father the newsletter with the 275 questions and said before Charles visits Mexico, he should be aware of this project and the ramifications. Charles's background was in conservation and anthropology, so it was the natural that he was interested. Well, he sent a letter to the British ambassador saying he wanted these 75 questions. He reduced our 275 to 75. He wanted these questions answered by the Mexican government. And so the ambassador invited the head of SARSH, Secretary of Agriculture and Water Resources, to the embassy for dinner. And oh, while you're here, I've got a letter from Prince Charles. And that really caused consternation. Anyway, we were able to develop that project. In '91, we started the registry project, Gary and Kevin, and I was thinking it was only trees, but Mahina corrected me, it's perennials. We recognize orchards or individual trees that have been in Arizona for a long time, and that project is ongoing, and it's,
Who's doing that, Barney?
It's back under us, isn't it?
yeah,
I never hear anything
It's
of
not
it.
active
It went to
at the
Prescott
moment.
College for a while.
it came back to
Oh, I
Gary.
remember when it was at Prescott College.
And one of the interesting evolutions out of the registry project is the Kino Orchard project that Jesus Garcia is working on, both at Tumacacri and the Desert Museum.
So what about at the Rio
Mission
Nuevo?
Garden.
Mitchell Garden.
The
Mission
Mission
Garden
Gardens
Yes.
also
are
has, yeah.
He's
the
got it.
most recent iteration. In '92, Native Seed Search helped a group called TANAFA organize. And TANAFA stands for,
Traditional Native American Farmers
Association.
and we were one of the people that got the organization going, mostly with Indian groups in New Mexico and Arizona, mostly New Mexico and Hopi. And eventually they went out on their own after we sponsored them for a number of years, they use seventh generation foundation money to go out on their own.
Their director was here yesterday.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's stopping.
Clayton was here?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on his way through to do a consulting job, but he stopped to pick up seeds. We're organizing a mini seed school for them over in New Mexico this fall. We're hoping.
You didn't by any chance sort of inquire whether he might be interested in being on our board?
Well, you know, he loves
We've
us.
talked
and
about having him. The only problem is the distance.
the distance. Yeah,
Yeah.
he is on another cycle through their tribal council, and what that means is that he has to ask permission before he goes anywhere and find someone to replace him while he's gone. So he said, my travel right now is really sort of complicated. It's not impossible, but
Maybe
complicated.
later.
Yeah.
Boy, I want to pick up here
While you cough? Okay. Began research on the Chili Reserve from 83 to 93. It's located down here near Tubac, on the other side, on the west side of the highway. And the U.S. Forestry Service eventually recognized the reserve. We worked with a woman who had the cattle usage rights on the property, and she was all for it. She owned Santa Cruz Chili Company, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of her
Chili
name.
Company.
She's very nice.
English.
English, yeah. What's her first name?
Well, yeah, it was Judy English.
Judy, yeah.
Who's deceased. Her daughter now runs the company.
Oh, I didn't know she died. Oh, that's
Yeah.
too bad.
And this was the first time a government agency recognized a plant, a wild plant, that needed conservation, and so we worked out an agreement with them and the cattle leasing.
BLM land
What?
Forest.
Forest.
I think one of our board members' wives was working with us on this project,
Yes.
wasn't it? Yeah.
She-
We always seem to find that exciting.
She worked for the Forest Service.
Are these chiltepines or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the Chiltepines. In 93, we bought the Sylvester House. And,
Where'd that money come from?
oh, yeah, we need to talk about that big grant we got.
I see.
Mrs.
It was-
Anderson,
Mrs. Anderson, that none of us knew, had $1 million or $1.5 million that she split up between 4 or 5 organizations, and she gave Native Seed Search $250,000.
and we have no idea why.
Oh, I found out
Oh,
later.
you found out?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Here's the story.
She had a close brother whose money it was, and his plan was to give it all to the Desert Museum. He passed away before doing it, so it through probate it went to her. She didn't like the Desert Museum; they got none of it.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. I'm not sure we'd be here, certainly not in this forum if it weren't for that grant. We split it into 3 parts, and we used a third of it to buy Sylvester House, we used a third of it to buy the farm, and we put the other third in long-term savings in the market, actually, in socially acceptable
Did
stocks.
she have children, do you know?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Anyhow, that really helped us. As you can see, we bought 2 pieces of broccoli.
So that was in
with
the
it.
early 90s we
It
bought the
was- I
farm? I
think
thought it was late.
93.
I
We
think
bought
it
the
must
farm
have
in
been
93?
270.
We set that aside to buy the farm. And
In
then-
97, didn't we buy the farm in late?
Yeah, we set that aside
Got
to
it.
buy farmland.
In 94, we started the Sierra Madre project. And that project was a project to support Tarahumara traditional agriculture by building infrastructure. We started out building, we got the money, and we had a project manager in the mountains who's really a wonderful saint. And he has great rapport with the communities, and they started building stone retaining walls to conserve soil. And
But
then
that was your idea.
well,
They were interested in
Suzanne
farming.
Nelson
And
involved in that?
This was
eventually
before.
she was. She took it over. We were running it in the beginning. And he was not all that interested in seeds in the start. He was mostly interested in agriculture. But we could see this was a good guy, and that he had lived in the villages for many years. Juan Daniel
Oh, Juan
Villalobos
Daniel.
is his name.
The famous.
And did you get to meet him?
Not yet.
Oh, he's really is a saint. And he has a family. And so we've worked with them for a long time. Go ahead.
We started with retaining walls. We went to orchards, getting trees, seedlings started. We eventually got into putting new roofs on houses to collect rainwater in tanks. And for many families, this was the first potable water they had ever had. They were getting water out of creeks that were polluted or seeps that were polluted. And so this was...
And walking maybe as much as several miles.
Two.
And then carrying the water on their heads.
So this was a wonderful additional project. And it's still going. It's been very, very successful. In '97, we started the 4th Avenue store, where we sold crafts, and we were very successful selling seeds, t-shirts, caps, crafts, and that was really quite successful.
Barney, back at that time, was the retail sales there really a third of our revenue?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I hadn't realized how it had grown, and we were selling about 30,000, weren't we? Out of the little store at Tucson Botanical Garden. Was it more than that? I just remember the 30,000. I was shocked when I realized how much.
But it just skyrocketed when
Once
we went to
got
4th
into it,
Avenue. And so we were getting a third of our money from sales, a third of our money from grants, and a third of our money from memberships.
And donations.
And that three-legged stool is something we still look at
And
and wonder
it's
about.
worked for us really well.
In '97, we also started the Patagonia Conservation Farm. And that land was purchased by the Nature Conservancy. And then they peeled off some of it for us.
And historically, that land had been farmed
Yes.
down there for many years.
And prehistoric.
And prehistorically
Prehistorically.
too, so.
I walked the fields many, many times, and I finally found a couple of potsherds.
Right.
But up on the hillside, there's houses, pit houses, and so the area was heavily occupied prehistorically.
Survivory? Is that the people?
Yeah.
And the perennial water there is Sonoyta Creek that runs through there.
Or Harshaw.
Both.
I guess
They-
if one
very
runs.
close they come
Yeah,
together.
come together there, right in there.
I wanted to go back just for a second because we really haven't talked too much about collecting. You said, oh, we started seriously collecting. But Barney and I spent, what, a month on the road in there?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay? And of that, and we drove 1,000 miles, and of that, 12 of it was on pavement.
No, that's not true.
Oh.
8.
8. I'm a little loose with the figures, as you can tell. He's the numbers guy. But
We were collecting
it was
crafts in the mountains.
amazing. I mean,
And
we
we
just
got
go
the
from
crafts.
farm
Sierra
to
Madre?
farm.
See, this was
Yeah.
Chihuahua. And we got the crafts shipped out on the train, and we spent 2 weeks in collecting seeds, and we made 300 collections
Wow.
in 2 weeks.
And then the seeds in the north, from the Pueblos and Hopis, I did a little of that, but Kevin and Karen did a lot of the U.S. collecting.
And there was another guy who did a lot of the New Mexico stuff, wasn't he?
Brett.
Brett, right.
Yeah, he's put-
Oh yeah, Brett Baker. We haven't mentioned him. We haven't mentioned we had an office.
We
It's
had an
hard to
office
get
in
all this
Albuquerque.
squeezed in.
At the Peace and Freedom Center. And he put a presence of native seed search in New Mexico. He's now working with organic farmers.
He's an
He's a-
inspector, I think, for the state.
For the state.
Which is great. Great guy. We were very sad that we had to close that office, but when we opened the farm, we just didn't have enough money to keep that one going. And he had